Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the 4-day webinar series on Education Imperative for the New Normal, Planning for Flexible Learning. This webinar series is being brought to you by the Philippine Association of Private Schools, Colleges, and Universities, or PAPSCU, through the Assistance to Programs and Initiatives to Reform Education, or ASPIRE program, of the Private Education Assistance Committee, or PAYAC. For our participants from day 1, thank you for finding value in what we want to share with you. To those who are first-timers today, we encourage you to watch the 2 earlier webinars to get the full benefit of the series, especially on planning for your schools for flexible learning. Today, we continue with another 2 equally important topics regarding flexible learning. The first is the assessment for flexible learning, to be discussed by Dr. Marilyn Balagtas. The second is the stakeholder engagement for the new normal, to be presented by Mr. Benito Benoza. But before we start with the presentations, may I call on our project team leader, Dr. Esther Ohena, for her opening statement and learnings from day 2.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to welcome the participants to the 3rd day of the webinar, which is Planning for Flexible Learning. Let me mention that last night I saw on the news the information that our teachers in Mindanao had lined up in the highway of Davao de Oro. So I tried to Google the information on this, and this is what I saw. Teachers lining up the highway, and to me that suggests teachers' interests on participating in webinars and making sure that they know what's happening in the education system. This situation is similar to what is happening in the other parts of the world. In fact, when I Googled, I saw this picture as well. In the US, teachers are also trying to have internet in parking lots. You can imagine that throughout the world, the same thing is happening. Thank you, teachers, for having your interest. The message to people managing the school system is we need to understand the teachers' interests and needs. Let me mention about what we've learned yesterday. We've looked into the implications of flexible learning options and education technology affordances, especially on the curriculum and technology requirements, technology, pedagogical content knowledge, and appropriate technologies for teaching and learning, and of course, taking a responsibility for learning. Today, we'll be listening to the presentations of Dr. Balagtas and on evaluation options for learning, and Mr. Benosa for stakeholder engagement. And we would be, of course, learning on a lot of things on what to know, what to clarify, and what to check, what to do in these 2 major areas. Again, I'd like to welcome you all. Let's be together in this important discussion on the 2 topics for this webinar. Good morning to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ohena. May I now have the honor to introduce to you our first speaker, Dr. Marilyn Balagtas. Dr. Balagtas is the university professor and former dean of the College of Flexible Learning and EPNU at the Philippine Normal University. She was likewise the inaugural director of the Philippine Australian National Research Center for Teacher Quality, And she's also the president of the Philippine Educational Measurement and Evaluation Association Incorporated, or PIMEA. She holds a PhD in Educational Research and Evaluation from the University of the Philippines and a postdoctoral fellowship for research leadership from the University of New England, Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Balagtas for her talk on assessment on flexible learning.
Hello, thank you so much, Dr. Bedral, for that very kind introduction. To all our FB viewers or those of you who are tuned in to us this morning, a pleasant morning to one and all. So we are already on our day 3, and as mentioned by Dr. Bedural, we are focusing our session, at least in the first part of our morning session, on assessment in flexible learning. And then this will be followed on by Mr. Bennett for stakeholders engagement. So allow me to share with you what we put in the e-toolkit. So again, this is just an elaboration of what we put there in the e-toolkit that has already been shared. And if you are interested to know what I put there in the e-toolkit, kindly download this material from Cocopeia Facebook and also in the website of PAC. Okay, so this information could actually be shared with you now, and if you have time, you can download it. In the e-toolkit, I want you to understand how we design it. Of course, just like what Dr. Ohena has mentioned, we actually were guided by these questions: what to know, what to check, what to prepare, or what to do. And so I made use of this as my guide in understanding what one would probably want to hear or know in preparation for the opening of classes this coming school year. So these are the things that I want to cover. So what to know, what to check, what to prepare or take care of, and what to do. And again, at the end of this session, I hope I could add to your preparations in assessing learning in flexible modalities. But again, because our time is just good for 1 hour, you can always refer to the e-toolkit. And if still ideas are unclear to you, we could refer you to other resource materials. Just to make sure that everyone is okay, especially my viewers, the FB viewers, I would like to use some emoticons from the Facebook to check on you. Okay, I want to know who you are and how you feel right now. So may I request you to please look at your emoticons and try to answer the following. So I have 5 questions here just to know you. My first is knowing what you feel right now, and there are 3 emoticons that I want you to choose from. Kindly let me know how you feel right now. I'm looking at it. If you feel happy, of course, show me the face that is happy, and then if sad, the one looking down and curious. How are you feeling right now? There is no thumbs up sign, so that means you cannot hear me clearly because I see different emoticons here. It's funny. Those that I saw are not included. Now I see there's one who said curious, one happy, happy. Okay, I could see some emoticons coming out now, and I think you heard me clearly as I could see the right emoticons, although I still see some thumbs up sign. Usually, the like sign is what we normally do, but that means you are not following my instructions. Okay, so I'm glad you responded. So may mga nagla-like. So hindi talaga. Wala yan sa choice po. Tatlo lang po yung choices ko. But anyway, sige, you like the like sign. Let me move on to the second question then. Were you able to attend our webinar on day 1? So may I request all the viewers to please let me know. So now you see the 3 options. Yes is one. That is where you will show me the thumbs up sign. And then the sad face if you failed to do this, you were not able to attend the first day. and the wow or shock sign, as if it tells us that, well, you are not aware, you were not told, or you didn't know that there is such a webinar happening. It's just this day that you were able to understand it's happening. Okay, so let's move on to the third. I saw most of you share, well, you showed the like sign, so that means you were able to attend the first day. That's good. And again, just like what Dr. Bedral has advised us to do a while ago, if you failed to miss, if you missed rather the sessions on day one, then you can always go back to Cocopeia PH Facebook, as that's available there for your viewing. Okay, as the webinar has been recorded. Now let's move on to the third question. Were you able to attend our webinar on day two? So that was yesterday. You will be using the same choices. Show me your response to this. Merong malungkot. So you failed to attend. Okay. That's good. I could see reactions. Maraming sad face. So they were not able to attend day two. But again, the same advice I would like to remind everyone of, that the recording is there available anyway. So just watch them when you are available, when you have time. Okay, let's move on to the fourth question. Can you hear me clearly? Am I loud and clear to you? Show me a heart sign this time. And like if it's just fine. And no if you can't hear me. Oh, may malungkot. You cannot hear me. So how's that? Okay. So meron namang loud and clear. I hope my voice is bearable to you. So I could see either a heart or like sign this time. And earlier on, I saw a sad face. So I hope your connectivity is good. Anyway, ayan. Hit the like, care, love, and care actions. All right. So I could see most of you could hear me clearly. So that's good. Thank you so much for giving me a sign that I am clear to you, loud and clear to you. That's good. I am really conscious of how I am received by you, because this is not for me to just share to my laptop what I wanted to share, but it's really meant for you. So that's what I'm thinking of, and that's the reason why I'm asking how connected, how good your connection is right now. So how about the fifth one? I'm moving now to the fifth question. Do you need to know how to assess learning in flexible modalities? Is this something you still need? So the options here are, yes, I need this so much. Second, yes, but I heard enough on this already. And the third one, no, as I have been practicing this already. So unfortunately, well, that's the saddest part. If you are still here, no, and you know it's going to be about assessment. So I want to know now your reactions, please. Let me know to what extent you know already how to assess learning. So I could see a lot of heart signs here. And some of you heard a bit of heard enough rather on assessment. So I hope I could add more to your existing knowledge. Most of you responded saying I need this so much. Okay. So again, because I have only 1 hour session with you, you could always refer to the e-toolkit. It can be downloaded. Try to access that so that if ever there are details that you want to hear from me, you can direct me to discussing this again later on in the Q&A if ever I could not cover them in my presentation. All right, so thank you for giving me the signal that this session is indeed needed. Let me cover now in detail what we put there in the e-toolkit. So again, the section of the book has 4. It begins with what to know. And under this section, I try to anticipate questions that you might have in understanding how to assess learning. And I have here 7. Let me discuss each one of them. Let me begin by explaining to you what assessment is, or what is assessment of learning, the way I use it, and the way I learn it as well. Being into the field of of assessment, I usually define assessment as a process in gathering and organizing quantitative and qualitative indicators or evidences of learning as basis for decision making. If you notice, I highlighted quantitative here because it's easy, to organize data if they are in quantitative form. I'm not saying you should always aim for that, but sometimes our data collection could be qualitative. Let's say you ask students to respond to an essay question, the response is definitely in qualitative form, okay? Or you want a research work, and that is qualitative also in its form. But then again, if you want to describe how well the student has demonstrated the skill that is revealed by the response given, then our tendency is to always think of a numerical equivalence of the response, because this would be easy to aggregate or to combine with all other data that we gathered from the same person, or when we want to compare that person with other individuals taking the same course, then it would be easy. So for convenience, for practicality, and yes, in organizing that, we normally go through the process of measurement. But of course, take note, assessment is not the end of the process. It is just actually a prelude to a very important role that we do, and that is evaluation. And that is when you make a decision as to whether the person can be promoted, or if the person should be retained or should take again the course or go back to the instruction, or be given another instruction until he or she has reached the level of success or the level of proficiency that we would consider a success. So assessment is necessary when we evaluate a person. Now let's move on to why assess learning. Okay. For this question, why we assess learning, I normally explain this by just using the three purposes: the assessment for learning, of learning, and as learning. When we talk of assessment for learning, think of it as the formative and could also be a diagnostic assessment. It is assessment that is non-graded. It is an assessment that is an aid to helping students meet your essential learning competencies. Of course, you should always begin by knowing what the essentials are that your students have to know or acquire. And then you can use assessment as if it is a technique that could help the students gain what these essentials are. And of course, it could also inform if your instruction has been effective or not. So if the purpose is to monitor the learning of the students, if they are progressing in attaining the essentials, then you are actually doing assessment for learning. However, if the purpose of your assessment is to certify if indeed after they have been exposed to what you believe in as an effective instruction, that they really have met or attained the essential learning competencies, and indeed they met your criterion, then you could say assessment of learning, and that's the summative assessment, which could be graded. But just a reminder, sometimes the intention of our assessment is assessment of, that means it is summative, but the outcome is not. And what do I mean by that? When you set your summative assessment, set your criterion for success. So let's say in a 100-item test, what part of the 100 should have been answered correctly by the students? Let's say, is it 75% correct? That could indicate success to you. If yes, then let it be known not only by you, teacher or the assessor, but most especially your learners. Let them understand what is success to you. And then that's not enough. You should also look at the percentage of students who have met that minimum level of proficiency you have set. So for example, in a 50 class size, or let's say you have 50 students in your class and you gave them a 100-item test. What to you is a gauge of success in terms of the whole performance of the class? Is it 50? Is that enough that only 50 of the let's say 25 of the 50 were able to reach your cutoff score or your gates of proficiency, or should you aim for more than that? Let's say, would it be good to aim that at least 80% of your students should have reached the level of proficiency that you want them to be at as a result of an effective instruction? So ask that yourself. So in other words, you have to check right away the results so that you could understand what actions to take after, if you will grade them or not. Because if your criteria have not been reached by your students, I mean the criteria of success, your set of criteria for success is not being demonstrated or met by your students, then that means you have to go back to redesigning your instruction. Maybe your modality did not work, so you try another modality until such time that your students would meet the level of proficiency that you want them to demonstrate as a result of your instruction. So that is how assessment of learning should be done. No, it should not end by just you saying it's time for me to grade you even without looking at the data. And of course, the third purpose of assessment is assessment as learning. This is the kind of assessment where you empower the students to be assessors of their own learning. They cannot just simply wait. They should be trained to assess themselves by, first, of course, they have to know what are essentials. And I hope that what the teacher believes in as essentials are also essentials to the students. And then the method of instruction that we employ as teachers, I hope to the students, they see this also as appropriate or matched with their preference, their preferred way of learning. And of course, they are also capable of evaluating if the way they use in learning has led them to attaining the goals that they have set for themselves. So this is the empowering kind of assessment where we treat the students as a co-assessor of their own learning. Let's move on to the third question: what to target when assessing learning. Okay. And in this part, I would like to give emphasis on the five learning targets normally given by educational experts, those who are into assessment like Macmillan, Richard Siggins. They would normally classify learning outcomes or learning targets into five. They have the affect or disposition, then the knowledge, reasoning skills, and product. And if you notice, I put affect here at the top because for now, in this time of COVID, I think we have to be more focused first. Make sure that students' needs, the Maslow comes before, Bloom. They would call that way of designing instruction, Maslow over Bloom, which means to say that make sure that your students are in good condition, that they are really in the right mindset to study, that their learning environment is conducive to learning, and then of course that they have the right attitude and values to learning. And once that has been satisfied and we were conscious of addressing it, then it would be easy for them to proceed to acquiring knowledge, which would defer to, the content or the concepts, the principles and theories that they have to understand to inform their practice. Then reasoning as a way to checking whether they really understood the knowledge that they have acquired, if they could translate this in their own words and elaborate this further on, or explain how this could be applied in their own context. And then the skills here would refer to the behaviors that could be shown without any product at all, like one's ability to communicate, if that could be shown, so that would fall under skills, and one's ability to collaborate would fall again under skills. But there are skills that could end up with a product, something concrete, and that is another category among the five learning targets explained by Macmillan and Stiggins. And if you notice, the learner is always there at the center. So at this time, I think we have to be very sensitive to the needs of the learners, not only of our needs. Of course, we have to check on our capability too as teachers, but we have to check our capability again for the sake of our learners. That's the reason why I put learner there at the center, to remind us that when we talk of different modalities in assessing learning, try to consider what the students would have access to. Okay. So now let's move on to the guiding principles. And before I discuss these guiding principles, I would like to imagine, or us imagining first, the learning environment that would require flexible modalities. So what could be this scenario? So I'm looking here at the different scenarios in what we mean now as learning environment, because the learning environment this time in COVID-19 time is not just the classroom. It could be the home, or the combination, or it could be virtual. The learning environment could also be a virtual classroom, or it could be the global classroom, as we could access, especially if we have online, we have connections, internet, then the whole world could be our classroom, the learning environment. But then again, what kind of delivery and assessment should we employ given this complexity in the child's learning environment? We have to ask ourselves where the students are at. Are they more inclined to needing help? So we could consider them, if we talk of classroom-based instruction, this could be the more teacher-reliant learners. Or are they mature enough to be left on their own? So they might be at the right side, leaning to more self-regulated learner. And that is important to me as a designer of instruction and assessment, because I need to know the kind of help I should be extending to my students. If they need more of me as a teacher, then of course the teacher herself or himself is already a resource. But if you know that you are an imperfect person, then you should help your students learn more by exposing them to other instructional materials, because there are times, what you could provide within a period is something that they don't just need. They need more than that, especially if these are self-regulated learners. So they need to know more, or what probably they heard from you is something that they already know. So let them gather information from other resources. Like, you can expose them to real things, realias, print, or if you look at the other route, it could be information via air, from online, television, radio, or phones. Okay. I could see sad face, so maybe I am too fast. Am I too fast? Let me know. And then again, at the other side. So let's say at this point, I think we have no choice but to consider remote or distance learning, and then ask yourself again: are these learners I'm dealing with, who are now have to go through remote learning, the people who need a scaffold, somebody mature enough to help them learn? And if you are not there, then I hope parents could join. Okay, so that is where we need the involvement of stakeholders like parents themselves. But if you know parents are busy, then you have to be sensitive to this possibility, and therefore you have to provide materials. If the students do not have access to internet, then these should be print materials, and preferably, I highlighted here that the materials you prepare are modules, because they are self-contained, self-paced, and complete, materials with and information with feedback. But you can always back this up with other materials from videos, online, and so on. Or again, if it's air, you have a lot of choices. Well, of course, there could be the online materials, television, radio, phones, but these two are one way in their way of communication, so not so interactive, unlike that of online or maybe through phone. But again, like what Dr. Yeban has advised us yesterday, if we do synchronous, we have to limit the time. But I tell you, it's really important, based on my experience, for you to combine asynchronous and synchronous as much as possible. I'm not saying this synchronous session should be frequent, but make sure that at least within the week, no, you ask the students how they are, but through at least a synchronous session, and observe the time frame for a synchronous session. And the most, I think, even for adults, is maximum is 3 hours. So we have to really make sure that our webinar here would end not beyond 12 o'clock, as we need to apply what has been advised on by Dr. Yeban in yesterday's session. So going back, so now that you have imagined the flexible learning environment that I have in mind when I was writing this portion on assessment, What then is the rule? Given this learning environment, apply as is the constructive alignment rule. That means once you have determined what these essentials are, like the most learning essential learning competencies of depth ed, or you may call it the most essential learning outcomes if you are from teacher ed, that could guide you already in designing your assessment. So you can start designing your assessment once your essentials are known. That is applying understanding by design by Grant J. McTighe and Grant Wiggins. But if you are a more student-centered designer of assessment, you will not only look at the alignment of the assessment to the curriculum, but also its alignment to instruction. That whatever instructed by the teacher and the modality in using it should be as much as possible your way or modality of assessment as well. Okay, of course, the content should always be based on the curriculum. Other things that we have to be mindful of when we talk of assessment are the following principles. First, I've said this earlier on that you have to know what your targets are. So that means purpose driven. This should be purpose driven. Sorry for the typo error. And then it should be valid. That means you choose the right method for assessment, the right tool. If we talk of tests, the items are really aligned to the objectives that they ought to measure and so on. And it should be reliable. That means there is consistency in information that we get from different sources pertaining to the same person. And if we use different modalities, let's say one opts to use face to face, and then verify this using online, and you see consistent results, and that is also what we mean by being reliable. Okay, and then authenticity. So that is the issue on making sure that what we do in assessment is a reflection of what the students actually encounter or experience in real life. So the nearness of the situations that you put in your assessment to reality makes your assessment better. And that is what we mean by being authentic. Another principle here is the principle of fairness, and that means the language of your assessment should be the same language of instruction, or the language that you use is the language that students usually use in communicating with one another. Don't try to bombard them with highfalutin words, because if your test is not anyway a test of vocabulary, the simpler the language is to them, the better, because here again, language could be a barrier. If you want to know what they know, what they really know, then the simpler the language is, the better. Okay, that is an illustration of fairness. What else? Of course, you have to be sensitive with your culture. That when you put situations there, make sure that these situations are what students normally encounter in real life so that they could relate. And it should also be gender fair, religion fair, and a test that is inclusive, meaning you are conscious that there could be students with learning disabilities, for example, or students under difficult circumstances. So in other words, try to imagine all kinds of learners, especially as they are in different homes, and the learning environment of one could be different from the other, that you have to anticipate all these possibilities in the design of your assessment. Then it should be practical, that when you do it, it could be administered with ease, not only by the teacher, but also by the something that students could access to easily. It should be continuous, and that should be clear, as you can see here, that assessment is linked to curriculum and instruction. It is an ongoing process. Once you say, I'm learning, then assessment is always there, because it is assessment that tells if you are learning or not. Okay, so that means assessment could even happen before instruction or while instruction is going on, and even after. Okay, and definitely after, because that's what we are used to. And it should be holistic, and that is actually what the curriculum, K to 12 curriculum, aims, that when we design our instruction, we develop holistically the learners, and that they are also equipped with 21st century skills. That should also be what assessment do, no? That it should assess as well knowledge, reasoning up to affect and disposition. Another is balance, and that is the use of multiple methods or tools in assessing learning, because there is no such thing as perfect assessment. we can only say it's a combination of imperfect tools. So the strength of one should be acknowledged. That's why a method that we know is possible should be used. But whatever are the imperfections of this method could be complemented by the strengths of another method. So we have to combine all possible and appropriate methods so that we reduce all these imperfections that we know a tool or an approach could have, just like us, our imperfections too, as a person. That's why we cannot just rely, or our students cannot just rely on us. They need to know also how we assess them so that they could check on our imperfections too as assessors of their learning. Okay, and finally, ethical, that we have to make sure that students' health, security, and protection is always addressed. No, we have to be sensitive that when we communicate, for example, assessment data, that we don't harm the person. We do not put the person in an embarrassing situation. Okay, next, what are the methods and tools in assessing learning? So we have here, I have here 5 possible approaches, and the tools are given to. So I guess you know already what we mean by objective tests. These are tests where formats are forced choice, like selected response, multiple choice format as an example, or a short response test where you identify or you ask the students to just simply supply a short response to it. Or it could be a written test, but if it is a written and it is already a constructed type of response of a test, then you have to support this with a rubric. You have to give the rubric in advance. At the time they are asked to write, let's say, compose something, the rubric should be there so that they are guided on how to respond. They know what you mean by being excellent. Don't keep that idea of excellence to you. It should be communicated to the students. That's true too to performance tasks when the students are asked to demonstrate their skills, or if they are asked to create products of their learning. And another approach is the portfolio assessment, which is a collection of all the evidences of students learning from day one of the course to a certain period when you want to have a look at their portfolio. So this is a good practice that I hope teachers practice as well, because I practice it in my class and I find it really very useful, not only to me but also to my students, as they end up with something concrete that documents, all the things that they have learned in the class. And of course, for the affective component, the self-report is something we have to consider as well, but this would require other formats like scales, checklists, and the like. Now, if you notice, I put here as the legend, no? The legend of as to the appropriateness, because when we talk of validity again, this has something to do on the appropriateness of your approach to the targets that you have set, or the tools that you design, again, to the targets that you have set. It's always with reference to the targets. And among the 5 learning targets, when we talk about knowledge, the most effective and efficient way of doing it is by giving objective test formats. But if we talk of reasoning, a more appropriate one is the written constructed response test. If we talk of skills and product, performance based would work there, no, as the most appropriate. And when we talk of portfolio assessment, that's where you look at the product or evidences of learning, and you could also have a good a view or assessment or gauge of the affect or the disposition of the person. So you can do that as well in portfolio assessment. And for self-report, again, that's more on the most appropriate one for affect and disposition is the self-report, no, with the use of scales, which the students have to accomplish themselves, and not necessarily just entrusting it to others. Let's move on. Who could assess learning? Okay, so who could assess learning? Well, we normally see the teacher as the most credible assessor of learning. But again, take note, you are imperfect, just like tools, that they are imperfect too. So we too, teachers, have our imperfections. So we could make mistakes too. And so we need to be supported, backed up by other assessors. And this could involve other assessors, could involve the students themselves. Again, in the assessment as learning, we really give value to students' evaluation of their own learning. As long as they are trained, and the yardstick of the teacher in assessing the student is the same yardstick that the student uses in assessing himself or herself. And that should be true too to the peers, to the parents, and other possible stakeholders that could come into the picture. Okay, so now that we are home based in our learning, that parents should have a say too, no, in the assessment of their students. Again, the weight could vary. That depends on the appropriateness of the person to the kind of learning target that you are assessing. Like, for example, in the case of the teacher, well, most often the four targets here are assessed by the teacher, and teacher could have a heavier weight on that. But for affect, again, that could be for the person, for the learner himself or herself. For the peer, they could be credible when we talk of skills and products, especially if the works are done by group. Then sometimes the peers are even more credible than the teacher. And if it's done at home, then you can engage the parent by saying, here is the rubric. Try to observe your child, see if he or she does the following. So kindly have a look, and if you were the teacher, how what would be your rating to your child. But again, that would require training, because we want them to understand too how assessment is done by trained people who do the assessment, so that they would eliminate as much as possible their subjectivity and be objective, just like the teacher, in assessing the child. Okay, and of course, if there is practicum here, the people who have been witnesses to the performance of the person could have a say too in the assessment of the learner. And for the last question, how to assess learning in different modalities? Well, you've heard yesterday's session that there are five or more. There could be more. But whatever these modalities are, again, if it's going to be face-to-face or other modalities, take note, when we talk of assessment, they should be the same, no? In terms of targets, purposes, principles, approaches, techniques, tools, and even assessors. But in the assessment part, assessors part, there could be differences in the weight, as well as when we talk of the approach in assessing. Let's say, will there be the same weight for pen and paper that is done in school, where you could see the actual conduct or administration of the test, from that which is done online? So you use your professional judgment here in trying to weigh how assessment should be done, considering the different modalities that you employ. Okay. Now, you might wonder, this has not been explained in the e-toolkit, but I'm adding this, that if we talk of assessment combined with instructional modalities, a better route is, after knowing your MELOS or MELCs, no? Most essential learning competencies, it would be good if you have a pre-assessment to find out, no, what the students have prior to giving them instruction, because we cannot assume that they are blank slate or tabula rasa, or knowing nothing, because now that they have access to the internet, they could really read in advance. So try to do a pre-assessment, find out, do they know what you intend to deliver? If assessment says yes, they know everything, they have reached already the level of proficiency that you have set, then verify this by giving some more assessment, like maybe you can forego test because that has already been revealed by pre-assess or captured by pre-assessment, but give this time a task for the other targets that may not have been captured by your pre-assessment, and maybe you could show them evidences of what they were able to acquire while they are waiting for the opening of classes. Or that's where portfolio could probably come in. But if they say only some as a result of your pre-assessment, then that's where you need to design your instruction considering your needs, capabilities, and limitations. Then again, because we are into flexible modalities, think of your modality of instruction, and whatever that is that you employed for instruction, we hope that you use the same for assessment, especially for formative assessment. But you can rethink on your approach when it comes to the summative assessment or the graded one. Okay. Now, here, this is another presentation. So this is in the form of 4 quadrants, because I want to see here the difference of all the possible modalities we can employ, from face to face to a remote or distance learning, and from offline to online. Now, I focused a while ago the different approaches to assessing learning, that you can give a test, or you could give a task. So that's the performance. It could end with a product or no product at all, or give them the requirement to consolidate all their evidences of what they were able to learn and how they learned this. And this is what I mean here. So, of course, if it is a face to face instruction, oftentimes all these assessments are in print form or concrete form. But if it is offline, then still print, but they should be sent or couriered to the students. But if you employ the online, then everything could be online. This could save paper. But then again, it depends on the resources of the students and their connectivity. So you can also be blended. So that's where you can combine face to face and online. All right. So this is another way of explaining the different modalities in assessing learning, considering the purpose of your assessment. So formative is the assessment for learning. If your aim is for that, it is an aid to learning and it is a non-graded. You can give a test that is non-graded. This is like giving exercises, but make sure you give feedback. No, you can automate feedback if it is online. But of course, in face to face, you could always be general in giving feedback. When one answers to your question very good, or when you want to say something and they keep on nodding, and that's already a sign of communicating with you, and that gives you also a signal that you can proceed. So that could be true too in an online setup. And then of course, when we talk of tasks, that can be done as well in all modalities, and so with portfolio. But again, if we talk of portfolio here, there is such thing as working portfolio. It's just like an initial collection. It's not yet finalized. Yet one would just keep on storing all the materials that he or she has gone through or developed in the process of learning. So that's the working portfolio. It's a process kind of portfolio. But if it's summative that you are thinking of, something that is already graded, then you have to make sure that well, the tool is indeed well designed, so that you could address issues on cheating. You can eliminate those possibilities for cheating, and all doubts that you might have, no, when assessment is happening. And again, when we talk of summative, the idea here is more on certification. It's like saying you certify that this person is proficient in this particular lesson. So you can proceed to the next lesson. So that is what I mean here by being summative. Okay. And just to point out the difference here, in the earlier example for formative, I said the working portfolio could be your starting point. But if it's going to be summative and graded already, then maybe you could direct the students to just showing what is valuable, what could really speak of what they have learned, the real evidence, the best work that they could show. That's the show portfolio. Or maybe a bit of an explanation and evidence of how they got there, just to verify that it's really them who produced the product and not anybody else. So you should also be careful here that I put here. Sorry, I forgot to mention about this. The level of comparability. So here, if you notice, they are all comparable. Anyway, they are non-graded. But when it comes to the graded assessment, you have to look at my notes here. There are modalities that, well, we could be confident of having good reputation too in assessing learning. But there are those that are still questionable because probably of some limitations in our gadgets and in our connectivity. So when we talk of school-based, of course, this should not be an issue because this is something the teacher witnesses, no, happening in the classroom. But if it is home-based, quarterly tests and achievement tests, my code here is less, because if you cannot make all conditions comparable across learners, then it would be good to probably, this is the time for you to let them come to the school if possible. But again, if there is a way to control the cheating aspect, then that is okay for online as well. So that's true here I'm actually talking here about offline, no? So it's like printed assessment that is sent to the students, courier. But when it comes to online, again, I would like to emphasize here that for test, synchronous. All right, synchronous here. I don't encourage to be happening for tasks. It should be asynchronous because as again in yesterday's session we can keep the students just for a certain period, so we cannot keep them that long. And considering that in task based assessment it's really more on demonstration of skills, that it should be done asynchronously. Better if it is asynchronous. Okay. uh, and look at my codes. So of course, if blended, it could be both, no, comparable across tasks. Let me give you samples. No, I want you to actually look at this, but I wanted to engage you here. But in the interest of time, let me just show you an example of an assessment that is done online. So this is done in MS Form. It's not Google Form, it is MS Form, but it does the same thing as that of a Google Form. All right, so this is the test. Hope I could modify it. Let me show you my test. So I designed it this way. Take note that if we talk of student-centered assessment, we need to be very clear of our directions. And if we could model our response, the better. So you could see here that I modeled how to respond to a constructed response test. Don't just say this is the rubric and this is the indicator for 4 points, 3 points, and so on. If you could model it, the better. Okay. And one thing good I like about MS Forms is the inclusion of this for immersive readers. So there is a portion for the students to listen to what is being assessed instead of just reading it if they have a problem with the text. So here is an example.
In assessment in Learning 2 via MS Quiz, sample only. Directions. Read carefully each item in the test. Every item has a set of 4 choices from where you could choose the correct and best answer for the problem given.
Okay, if you don't like,
tick the letter that
change
represents your
the
best
voice.
answer. Every item is to be scored from 0 to 3 points.
If that is
The
too
correct
fast, you
and best
can
answer is
slow
given
it.
3
Okay.
points.
Okay.
A response that is totally wrong is given 0 points.
Okay, so you can
A
adjust the
response
speed.
that is partially
All right.
correct, indicating one idea.
So that is something you
correctly.
have in MS Forms. Okay, and if you look, once you have written your test here, always that there is that component for AI. They call it immersive reader. This is something I did not see in Google Form. So you can use Google Form for surveys, but for assessment, I would prefer MS Forms. Okay. Let's look at how feedbacking is done in MS Forms. Sorry. Let's look at the question. So again, when you design your assessment, you have to be generous. If this is a formative assessment, you give your feedback per option. And if this is summative as well, it would be better for the students to understand how they responded and what could be behind the response. If it is a misconception, then that has to be corrected at once. So it is detailed. It is not one generic response that you are wrong. Sorry, you are wrong. Try next time. It's not like that. You really have to be more specific as to what could be the misconception behind the choice that one has chosen. Okay. So that is how we design our assessment. And one thing good about online, you can have different formats. You can employ a lot. Okay. And this one, it has a point system too, and so on. And another, you can integrate pictures. Okay, you can add colors. You don't have to worry about colors. And then you can integrate videos. So that is something you cannot do in paper modality. So again, if it is constructed response, don't just say this is the question and this is the number of points. That's not enough. You have to be fair by letting them understand how you will score them. What is 10 points to you? What is 8 points? So everything has to be communicated purely to your students at the start. Okay, so that is one thing you have to appreciate in online assessment. If this is accessible to the students, then why not use it? Because it has a lot of features that we don't normally see in a pen and paper assessment. Okay, and then you can also review. So this is again a component that I like in online assessment. It's loading slow, very slow. Okay, it's not moving anymore. Let me close some forms. It's not working, but I hope well, yesterday Dr. Bedrual showed examples of how to analyze data from forms, and that's almost the same here. But this one has features that are good for assessment of learning. So try to explore this when you have time. Anyway, I just gave you a sample for you to discover later on. Now, another way of assessing learning is, of course, through the learning management system. Whatever you have, this one is, I'm showing you an example of LMS. This is model-based LMS that we have in the university. It's free LMS, and I could also set up assessment here. Here is an example of what we did. So we gave our scholars assessment, and this is in preparation for, this is a training program for teachers of the Department of Education. They come from 17 regions. They are non-licensed teachers, but they are RA10612 scholars. We put up a test for them, and it is online in our platform. So if you open it, you have to put all your instructions as if you are talking to them. So welcome to this blah blah blah, as if there is this teacher talking to them. So that is something we have to be conscious of when we design our assessment online. And then you have to tell them the scope of your assessment, some reminders on how to respond, what the do's and don'ts are. And again, because we want to protect our exams, that we could ask them to sign a non-disclosure. And what does this non-disclosure say? That they should not have copied the test, that they should not have taken a photograph or a video or print screen of the items, and so on. Then they have to sign this. So that is what we do. We let them sign so that we have something to refer to, at least to protect us, at least to comfort us that these students will take the test as honestly as they could. Okay, and then they could send the non-disclosure. I would like to show the non-disclosure, but I think I'm running out of time again. So I can move on to the next part. Sorry, naghang po ang aking laptop. Okay, I'll just remove some parts. I can move on. Hello. Okay, let me continue. Okay, turn on lights, please. Okay, I mentioned about portfolio assessment too. Again, if it's face-to-face, school-based, students could give their portfolio this way. But this is really cumbersome, to check, especially if you deal with so many. So you have to direct them on what you value, what you need to see in their portfolio as a result of the curriculum that they were exposed to. But again, if it is online, it could be digital. So this is an example of a digital portfolio. Everything has been digitized and then put in a CD. But then again, if they have access, then why don't you just let them create their e-portfolio? So this is an example of an e-portfolio, that everything here is available in the website. What the students just do when they submit their portfolio to me is just their link. So I can show you this, for example. Let's explore this. So this is one thing good about portfolio assessment. It's accessible to the students. If they want to show this to anybody, then they can do that. So look at this. These things that are put here, there are so many. They were the ones we did in the classroom, but they are organized here, and they just students just selected those that they value in life, and those that they want to show to the teacher. So it's up to them to design it. The design here is not my call, it's the call of my students. And if we talk of performance-based assessment, task-based, these are all task-based. But whatever these tasks are that you are asking the students to do, always give them the rubrics. No, don't give this only at the time of their assessment. Give all the rubrics in advance so that they could prepare themselves, and they could study also the rubrics if they are amenable to the criteria given their condition. Okay, so that is an example of portfolio assessment. Now, I would like to show another way of doing it. So this time I'll show it in the platform, how we do it in the LMS. I'm showing a different platform. This is the paid. This is this time a paid LMS. Earlier on, I showed you a free LMS. So what is good about paid LMS is that you can personalize, no, customize your LMS. So I'll show you one example. These are the books that I've written under Rex. So let me show you one. In case you want to know more about assessment, you can refer to this. Design your course. So if you think of this as your subject area and you have the LMS, design it in an organized manner that students could visit this anytime. And if you could put the date there, the period when they are supposed to learn these lessons, the better. So you can start with a course map, and so on. So there should be a course map, what you intend to cover. It would be good if that is there. Okay. And then, of course, all your expectations should be articulated at the start. So that's how you do it. And then all the lessons that you want. So let's say this is the start of a formal lesson. Then whatever are the parts of your module, they should be put here too, including your assessment. So all of these from understand, these are the parts of the module that I designed. They could actually be regarded as assessment exercises. But one of these could be your summative. All the rest could be formative. Okay, so that's assessment part. And then if you notice, we don't only assess them by week or at the time the lesson has been delivered. Of course, we always have the summative, and that's normally done at the end. So you have to set that up too. So if it's summative, then you have to ready your online test. And my example here is in Google Form. If I click this, then you will see a test in Google Form similar, or an MS Form similar, but this one I did in Google Form. For some reasons, I have reasons there, but I use summative, I use MS Forms now. And then I end up usually my course with a portfolio, an exhibit of all the works of my students. And the one that you saw a while ago is an example. If I click one of them, this is another, you will see a different portfolio. So let's look at this. Oops, sorry. Okay, so this is another portfolio. And look at how it was organized. It's a different way from that of what the other lady student of mine did. But all the links here are accessible. And again, there should always be a rubric. And the heart of portfolio assessment is students' reflective journal. So that's the beauty of portfolio, because you have all, it consolidates all the works of the students from day one up to the last day of your session, and it organizes everything. Okay, so let's continue. 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Okay. I forgot. Again, let me go back to this part, because the reason why I moved to this is not just for that purpose of explaining to you how you set up. But one thing good I like about this, earlier on you saw a portfolio in websites outside LMS. I actually just integrated those outputs in the LMS. But there are LMS that have provisions for portfolio. This is an example, okay? In the Rex Schoology portfolio, Rex Schoology, so this is managed by Rex Bookstore, they have a portfolio part. So when you open this part, imagine your students being asked to do a portfolio. They can organize all their works here. So these are the things that I did for the company, for example, or for my class. So I can organize this in the way I want. I can put icons to represent the elements of the work. And then if you want to know, for example, what I put here, you look at the number, you can see it. So let's open, for example, one work. There is always an annotation. So if this one explains the value of everything that I put here, and that should be made clear to the students too. If you want to add more, there's file, link, and page that you can set up. So you can add more. It's unlimited. So that's one thing more that is good in paid LMS. There is no constraint. Hindi siya masyadong, sabi nga nila, unlimited use of the platform. And in free LMS, usually may limit. So yun lang ang disadvantage. Okay, so I hope at this point you are still okay. Can you please again, just to ensure that you are okay? Can you please give me a sign that you are still okay? Let's check what's my. Okay, show me the sign that you are still okay. Are you still happy? Are you still okay? Are you sad or still curious? Show me, please, what your response is. I want to see. Oh, there are those of you who are still curious what I could offer. So, see, you are not listening. You probably didn't see my screen. It says here, use happy, sad, curious, but you are showing me the like sign. You don't know how to follow instructions, my dear. O may heart sign din. Sige, yan ang gusto nyo, go. Anyway, the fact that you are responding, that means you are listening to me. So that's fine. Mm-hmm. Okay, still curious what to learn from me. Go ahead. Explore more the e-toolkit. So let's move on to the second component of the e-toolkit, what to check. What learning targets does your school assess? So I actually here provide you in your toolkit some guides that could help you decide on how to prepare your assessment, no, of students learning, considering the different modalities. So let's say, will it be pure school-based, or that means it's face-to-face? Will you be targeting all of this? Definitely. If we talk of holistic assessment and essentials, all this should be targeted still, whatever your modality is. So you could just put a check there and put a star if this is something you have to consider as well, considering now the situation that we are into, no, and the modality that we should employ, considering the resources that we have and those that our students have access to. All right. So this is how I want you to respond. What you have for now, what you are used to, and what you intend to do, considering the results of the environmental scanning that you did, the data that you were able to gather from the tools, if ever you will use the tools that we provide here in the toolkit, the YOBS toolkit. Okay. So this is how I want you to respond to this. I'm just guiding you here. No, this is just a suggestion again on how you could plan how to assess students' learning. And then, how are these learning targets being assessed? So when we talk of how, these are the approaches. So again, there are 5 possible learning assessment approaches you can employ. Decide which of these you have at present. Most likely, because we are used to face, that we are using all this. But I just don't know. I put here question mark because when I ask people if they are practicing portfolio, not all responded to me positively, which means that this is not yet so much practice in schools, no, or by teachers. Only those who probably have experience to be assessed this way are the ones practicing and value such approach, no. But I tell you, once you get to use this, students will like, no, the way you assess, because at the end of the process they have something concrete to keep. Hindi katulad ng test paper na pwede nang itapon after, but this one is something that they will value in life. And up to now, even my portfolio, when I was in UP studying taking up my PhD, my portfolio is still intact and I really do value it. So this is like more than a decade ago when I finished it. Okay, so that's how valuable portfolio is to me, and I think that would be valued as well by the students. So if you are not practicing it yet, please start practicing it now. It's good that at this time, the students are just at home, and so that they could document, and the parent could have a concrete picture of what the child is doing at home. So, and the parent would be able to know how to guide as well. But again, the rule is always to ready your rubric or your scoring guide, so that the parents, that the students would understand how you will judge them or how you will evaluate them once their works are ready for submission. So this is something you have to accomplish. That's the intention here of the second part. No, it just provides you some possible matrices or guide on how to check on your readiness to assess learning this coming school year. So this time, for the question, what available tools does the school have? Again, it's like part of your environmental scanning. So this probably was not covered in the environmental scanning tool, but for assessment, find out, are there assessment tools that are already there? Can you easily convert this to its online format? For example, if you value the assessment before instruction and you know, for example, that there are tests that are available, and you can afford to buy them because they have services that we don't normally provide, but we know parents need. Like, for example, standardized or commercialized tests. I know, for example, the Rex Institute for Student Excellence, they have ACEs, which is a very good standardized test that could be for pre-assessment, and they have also for diagnostic assessment. So this could be used by the school if the students could afford, and the school could afford as well. But if not, then again, there's always an option. The teacher made test. Of course, if we talk of assessment that is graded, it is better if the test of the teacher is the one used. At least we are assured that whatever is put there, hopefully, no, after going through the process of validity and reliability, that whatever is put there in the test is the same as that of the curriculum and what or how the students were instructed. So these are just options. And then what else? Of course, look at what you have also at present. Are they ready for assessments that are normally done while instruction is going on? Like, are the quizzes, the exercises ready? The performance tasks with rubrics, if they are ready, and so on. So again, check the readiness, the availability of these tools, if they are okay for paper format that could easily be converted into something online using MS Forms. I suggest MS Forms, but of course, that's just my preference because of the adaptive, the immersive reader facility there, and the QR code that I don't see in other formats. Okay. So again, another, if we talk of platforms and applications and tools for assessment, check. Do you have the LMS? I still go for the use of LMS because that is something you can control, you can manage. If you are the administrator, you can visit all the classrooms of your students. But if they are everywhere, they use different platforms, that would be difficult to manage. So I would advise being a practitioner of online assessment and administrator, as I have been the dean of PNU College of Flexible Learning. It would be easy to monitor all classes from undergraduate to PhD level if they are all in the same platform, whether that is paid or free platform. Okay, but at least one for all, and then all the rest would be backup in case there is a failure for the access for one to access the school-wide LMS. And check, no, who could access this. All these are they were covered in the tool that has been designed by Jobs in the Jobs model. But as which one of those could go for assessment, especially those that you would be needing in conducting summative assessment, and check whether this is accessible not only to you as a teacher or to some teachers, but to all, preferably to all. If not, then you really have to vary your modality in assessing learning. And then the third component is what to prepare or take care of. And again, I put here some just guides, what the principal could check. If it's paper-based, please take note if you were able to access the toolkit now. I should have corrected that. Again, we apologize for whatever errors that were committed. As I think you heard, I hope to have you heard me that this was really done in almost just 1 month, no? Just so we have something to share in time for our webinar. But that will still be edited. So this one should be paper-based. I put there, I think, face-to-face. So that should be corrected. And these are guides for the principal. I have here 14 things to probably check, no? If you were the principal or if you were the teacher, again, it's a set of possible actions to take, because I said this is to help you prepare on the requirements in assessing learning. So you can check on this. They are there in the toolkit. And so with parents, some tips that you could do as the school head or whatever your position is, you can engage parents here too. There's a need to explain to them too how assessment is done, not only what we ask from them, no, as to resources, etc., but train them as well. If you want to include them in the assessment process, and there's really a need for them to understand how assessment is done, just like the kind of training that our students need from us too, if we empower them to become co-assessors of their own learning. And that's true to students. So again, these are just recommendations. Take them or ignore them. It's for you to decide which one works for you. Then the last section is again an advice on what you can do more at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year. So this is like knowing what then would be your modality for assessment. For example, for all the assessments that are done at the beginning of the school year, what would be its format? Will it be paper-based or computer-based? And who will be the developer? Is this something available already that meets the same purpose so that you could save time, in doing other assessments that could not be purchased or relied on from testing companies? And then try to time yourself so that you know that by next, if it's going to be this August when all classes begin, then you know that you are ready. So these are the things that I thought we should prepare as well, so that we are assured that we are ready when it comes to assessing learning. So that's it, I think. Now, again, what time is it? I've been given 1 hour only. So please just refer to the toolkit that we prepared. We were also given limits there as to the number of pages that we should be able to contribute. So please understand if there are details that I wasn't able to put there. But if you are interested to know more about assessment, please know I've co-authored a book on assessment in learning. This is usually a course given to pre-service teachers. You can access this at Rex Bookstore. There are two assessment books that I co-authored, which you could refer to in case you want to know more about those, approaches that I mentioned a while ago. Okay, some takeaways that I could share with everyone, at least something that you to synthesize, no, what I did a while ago and what I shared with you. These are my messages. Know what instruction has targeted. So that's your aim. And how it was delivered. That's your modality. And design assessment to be aligned with them. Conduct assessment having in mind the students' needs, their capabilities and limitations when deciding on the modality in doing it. Consider as many principles applicable in the practice of assessment as the more principles applied, the more student-centered assessment is. Remember that there is no perfect method or tool for assessment, and so use of multiple imperfect methods or tools, as the limitation of one can be complemented by the strength of another. So that's the principle of balance that I mentioned earlier. And finally, prepare your assessment in different modalities possible, but keep their intentions and integrity comparable. Okay, that's all. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Marilyn Balagtas, for that very comprehensive presentation on assessment. Okay, so right now we have a lot of participants and they're really happy with your presentation, Dr. Balagtas. In fact, a while ago, Integra Wingates said, "Wow, this is a good self-check for using an on for students on online learning, the use of those emoticons." So yeah, they got that strategy from you, Dr. Balagtas.
Thank you.
So, and we also have this question just came in. Uh-huh. From Lerma
Yes.
Kalingasan. Is DepEd changing the grading system?
Yeah, I don't want to preempt, but yeah, I am aware that they are drafting the policy, and I could say this because I have been asked to review also the policy, but that will be released soon, no? As soon as all the feedbacks are consolidated and accommodated in the draft that they did. But yes, they are actually making some amendments in the DepEd Order 8 series of 2015.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Marlene. Another question from Ma'am Perlita Dohinog. I want to ask if Cocopeya speakers will allow us to use the toolkit in our LCP. Yeah,
And that
LCP
yes,
Learning Continuity Plan, right?
yeah, and I think we articulated
Yes.
the same no last on the first day that this is free. Use it when you need it.
Yes. Okay, so if you have more questions later, you can still post your questions online via the cocopeya.ph where we are live streaming today. You can post your questions for Dr. Balagtas and we can still answer that in our open forum later. Okay,
Oh
so
yes.
thank you again very
So
much, Dr.
thank
Balagtas.
you too. May I also request the FB viewers to please show me your emoticon after my session. Thank you so much. I just want to see whatever emoticon that fits their feelings right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Balagtas. All right, so uh, okay, so thank you again, Dr. Balagtas. We now move on to our second topic for this morning. And our next speaker will discuss stakeholder engagement for the new normal. So I would like to introduce to you Mr. Bennett Benosa, who is currently the manager of the Knowledge Management and Networking Office of Simeo Inotech. And his career spans various positions in the Philippines and international organizations. Among them are UNESCO Office for East Asia, the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Secretariat and Inotech, and he was a visiting research fellow at the Center for Research and International Cooperation for Development in Tsukuba University in 2012. He holds an MA in Educational Management from the Philippine Normal University. Ladies and gentlemen, our dear teachers and participants, let us all welcome Mr. Bennett Mendoza.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and my thanks and congratulations to the many kind words already shared about PAPSCO, or the Philippine Association of Private Schools, Colleges, and Universities, and the Private Education Assistance Committee, or PAYAC, which joined hands to make this morning's webinar possible. As mentioned, this is the third in a series of webinars on the imperatives for the new normal, planning for flexible learning. This webinar is part of the project that includes development of a toolkit to aid education planners, instructional leaders, and school managers in putting together plans in transitioning to the new modalities for teaching and learning, which the current realities demand. This toolkit is being made available through the websites of PAYA, PAPSCO, and Cocopeya. And at this point, let me say thank you, Bedral, for such a generous introduction. What is supposed to be a sparse bio sketch could gain some gravitas when presented by Dr. Bedral. As mentioned, I currently head the Knowledge Management and Networking Office of Simeo Inotech. By way of setting context, allow me to spend a few minutes to give a bit of background on the institution I represent. Simeo stands for the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, a regional intergovernmental treaty organization established in 1965 to promote cooperation among Southeast Asian countries in the area of education, science, and culture. At present, CMEO comprises 11 member states, which are the 10 ASEAN member countries and Timor-Leste. The Philippines is a founding member, and currently it hosts 3 regional centers. CMEO has 26 regional centers all over the region, Southeast Asian region, covering specialized areas of education, science, and culture, and the regional network on tropical medicine and public health. INOTEC, or the Regional Center for Educational Innovation and Technology, was founded in 1970, but due to political developments in the region, it has moved through several capitals in Southeast Asia. The Philippine government offered to host the center in 1976, and it has been here ever since. Now it celebrates its 50th year. The center actually has the mandate to identify and help solve common problems, as well as anticipate development needs in the region, and assist countries to identify solutions to these education problems. And unfortunately, few of us, especially those in the education area, I guess, would have anticipated this major need, even if we have been preparing for it in terms of education in emergencies, health education, etc. INOTEC serves the region through our 3 program areas: capacity building and learning services, educational research, and knowledge management and networking. In capacity building, our interventions cover face-to-face, blended, and online learning programs, as well as MOOCs. You might have encountered some of them, which are now being offered online. Some of these courses are Guro 21 for teachers, or Gearing Up Responsible and Outstanding Teachers for 21st Century, Excels, or Excellence in School Leadership, to develop leadership and management competence school heads, and the MOOC, which is Teach On, a MOOC on reigniting passion for teaching. To date, we have more than 20,000 educators and development workers from Southeast Asia and beyond who graduated from our training programs. Under the educational research and innovation, some innovative learning systems, many of them are being mentioned nowadays, like IMPACT, or the Instructional Management by Parents, Community, and Teachers, MISOSA, or Modified In-School, Off-School Approach, and the ALS, or the Alternative Learning System, have been developed or were adapted by the Ministries of Education in the region. We also developed toolkits such as what we now call the MT4T, or Mobile Technology for Teachers, Health Promotion in Schools, etc. And we also undertake policy research and evaluation. In the area of knowledge management and networking, we have partnerships with more than 200 institutions within the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, and beyond. As part of the knowledge management, we produce print, electronic publications, videos, audio materials, and so forth. For the past years, INOTEC has been serving the education development needs of the region. As an institution, INOTEC is rather small. We are about 50 or so technical staff. We do not operate a school, neither do we have full-time students. But we were able to do all those programs and projects through partnerships and close engagement with our many stakeholders. This is an aspect of our operation which is extremely relevant now, as all CMU countries must confront this major disruption. We are watching closely how resumption of classes in Lao PDR and Malaysia would proceed, and hopefully to draw some lessons for other CMU member states, particularly the Philippines, and to facilitate learning from each other. This is definitely one area where engaging stakeholders and partners could add value to our programs and services. That, by way of context setting, presents the relevance of partnerships and stakeholder managing engagement with stakeholders for institutions. But why is it doubly important now? May I share that back in February, I was supposed to participate at a symposium on Industrial Revolution and Society 5.0. In the presentation, I was making a case for regional partnerships, for regional exchange, knowledge exchange as a mechanism for institutions in the region to address disruptions driven by the new economy, Society 5.0, and the emerging technologies. Little did I know that an even bigger disruption was just, and I was almost, I was never able to go. And if ever we would need further rationale on why we need to reach out in partnerships with our stakeholders, these situations serve to remind us that we are more linked together than we thought. Problems in one sector inevitably impact on others, and solutions may be better developed in concert. Through that rather long walkthrough about my institution and this major disruption in education services, hopefully helps set the context for further discussion on the practical aspects of engaging our stakeholders. I hope to share some of the current practices in my organization, and aside from knowing our stakeholders, the way we can encourage participation and involvement, understanding diverse interests of different parties, and sustaining relationships will be discussed. Moving on, who are our stakeholders? Any person or group or organization who may be affected by the activities of the school, or those in turn who can influence or affect the activities in our school, is a stakeholder. In one sense, that description can vary on everybody, but for practical reasons, we deal and engage different stakeholders and groups in different ways because they affect our operations in different ways. At Inotech, we have viewed stakeholders through different lenses because of the nature of our relationship with those partners. It is dynamic, it's constantly changing. We categorize them as upstream or downstream, but at the same institution play different roles at different situations. Case in point is the Department of Education of the Philippines, where it is certainly an upstream partner, as personified by the Secretary of Education, because she represents the country at the CMEO Council, which is the highest policy-making body of our organization. But they are also our co-implementers of various projects. And in some cases, they are the clients because they engage us to do research, to do training, and so forth. This map of stakeholders may illustrate the web of relationships. At the core of this web is your school. I am grateful to Dr. Balagtas for making a case of the need to put in the global and regional declarations and programs that provide context to reforms and change. At the left side, there's that over there. On the top of it would be the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDG4, which are the goals for education, international benchmarking like OECD and PISA, the ASEAN Education Work Plan, and allow me to mention for a bit the CMEO 7 priorities, which was a product of an Inotech service to the 11 ministries of education. At the lower end of that oval, we have major initiatives, or rather laws, such as the K-12 education reforms, the Bayanihan We Heal as One law, and of course, the ongoing Educalidad initiative. International benchmarking assessments such as PISA and TIMSS drive policy and programs at the micro level drive policy and programs at the country level, and at the micro level, classroom instruction. ASEAN and CMEO have their own programs and priorities, as I have mentioned. And at the national level, there are the pertinent laws and policies which drive current education initiatives. And while we identify them mainly as international agreements, national laws, these are being implemented by organizations and agencies that influence our schools' operations. Thus, they are, in a way, in a manner of speaking, stakeholders. At the other side of the figure, we try to depict that there are those who are within the organization and are directly affected by whatever changes we initiate. Others are outside the organization who influence changes or make things easier or more difficult for us to affect these change. We could call them our internal and external stakeholders. For the internal stakeholders, they are those who are within our organization. Aside from the teachers, this category would include the administrative staff, school nurses, librarians, the maintenance staff, and even those manning the cafeteria. Changes that we introduce would have implications on their job and their positions. The work that they need to perform would need to be aligned with the changes that we are making. They may require intensive training or be able, or they may require intensive training to be able to cope with the demands of the new tasks. Different qualifications and training may be required if we embrace new technology or when we incorporate technology staff's daily work. New roles or new ways of performing the roles may be needed, and thus they affect effectiveness of the initiatives that we introduce. For the external stakeholders, there are a number of groups and those who are outside the organization but are in a position to support or in another way our own plans. We can list a number of national government agencies, local governments, community leaders, local organizations and businesses, and other agencies in that category. Government agencies and local governments, for instance, have direct impact on our operations because they are tasked to issue licenses and permits. Others serve as regulatory or oversight service providers, courier services, and various other service providers would play a role in making out and using online learning. So the courier services, if we decide to use printed or learning modules. The school alumni form an important group of external stakeholders. Some of them are parents of enrollees, and others may be influencers or leaders of organizations. As an organization, we can look at our relationship with these groups of internal and external stakeholders as part of the resources that we need to manage and effectively apply. Some are known to us, and we can call on them to support us as allies in our undertaking. But there would be others, inevitably, who would need to be won over. And for that, we need to exert effort. In introducing change, all these stakeholders would have interests and concerns, and we need to consider these interests in developing our change management strategy. I would like to focus on the parents and perhaps the caregivers because they form a key stakeholder group in the remote learning system or ecosystem. Expect a major shift in their role in the remote learning scenario. From being clients who pay the bills and physically bring their children to school, help with homework and occasional projects, and interact with teachers and school principals and school officials, they would now be expected to play a more active role in instruction, to play with the teachers in managing instruction. They would serve as the main channel of information to the learners. Parents or guardians would have first-hand knowledge of how the children use the learning materials and the lesson given. Thus, they are effectively a partner in delivering instruction. This shift in the mode of involvement in their children's school activity is a major one, and thus not to be taken lightly. From being a client in the conventional education sense, the parent, guardian, or caregiver steps in to be a partner, an active partner in teaching and learning. I could share our experience with the impact or the instructional management by parents, community, and teachers along these lines. It's a 30-year-old, 3-decade-old technology practiced all over Southeast Asia, actually in Indonesia, some parts of the Philippines. And early 2000s, we discovered a number of schools which have been implementing it for since the 1970s. That's why we call it a 3-decade-old technology. Some private schools have tried to adopt it, and we gave them the technical assistance. But then the experience says that our in a private school has to be done closely with the parents. And significant social marketing is needed for the change to be introduced, since it was a major change, like involving children as for peer group learning or program instructor and use of modules, etc. The parents were not adequately informed, and midway through the semester, we had to do a bit of social mobilization, or, well, it's more of a corrective action at that point. Hence, the parents are a major stakeholder group, especially in the private school setting. Having done so in the public school, I now realize it's a bit easier to introduce changes. But for the private school, there are many other considerations that must be taken into account. So what do we need to know about our key stakeholders? In our social mobilization activities, we try to generate information that would allow us to develop. We start with the question, who is our typical parent? What is he or she like? How do they relate to other players in the learning system? Who makes the decisions in the household? The importance of generating that information was underlined by Dr. Ojena and Dr. Bedural when they covered it in the environmental scanning phase. Collecting meaningful information, systematically collecting meaningful information that can guide planning. Surveys and direct interviews would yield primary data drawn in a systematic manner, which is always useful. Focus groups can also serve as valuable insights for planning. And those who have experience and the training may do the indirect observation. We can also revisit existing data and information about our parents and the decision makers in the households. We can draw them from enrollment records, the participation of the parents in school activities, etc. And among the data that we would collect, the parents' educational background, I believe, would be quite important. If they are to perform a more active role, the educational background of the parents should indicate their capability to be a partner in the teaching. And that would be useful to find out whether or not they would have prior training or experience in teaching. Are their family members will be interested? And do they have the time and the inclination to perform that more active role? The demographics are also important. The family socioeconomic status, for one, may indicate access to hardware and services. All these are information that should be factored in and guide us in how to engage our stakeholders effectively. They vary, or our stakeholders vary in terms of their power or influence. Some are mandated to regulate and exercise oversight, such as the Department of Education field offices. Some enterprises have direct involvement in school operations. Others influence other organizations in the community. In a less direct way, but it's relevant to the administrators, banks, and financial institutions would be a concern. And the presence of development-oriented organizations and in the community would also be a factor. They would not only influence activities more directly, but they can mobilize resources to support your initiatives. Civic organizations, socio-civic clubs that run feeding programs or soup kitchens can be expected to be a partner in promoting healthy lifestyles and nutrition. These are but a couple of examples that you would have of the resources on hand and within the community. In the remote learning ecosystem, telecom utilities and internet service providers make up the all years, hence their importance. Let me share that our partnership with one telco in the early 2000s enabled us to run a project called Text to Teach, a program for the teachers. That was first generation using early generation mobile phones, no smartphones yet. And so the teachers were using the ordinary G2 cell phone videos to download short videos and then play them back on televisions. These short videos are covering difficult to teach lessons in science and math, which Innotech, as one of the partners, had a hand in producing. The telco allowed the teachers to be able to download the videos for free during nighttime when the network was less busy. Corporate social responsibility programs can be tapped to support education initiatives. These arrangements can be made to support education, as mentioned in the corporate social responsibility programs. Reaching out to the business community does not or need not be limited with the big corporations, whose headquarters may be far from you. The local computer shops, the delivery services, and the local groceries can also play a role. And you have to engage them because they can be partners in education. And as mentioned, not all stakeholders and influencers are organized and formal. The Parents Teachers Association is a formal body that holds influence, but we can note that within the single organization, there are discrete informal groups and patterns of influence. And that's why the school managers must be very sensitive to these informal networks and structures. There are influencers there or leaders there, even if not declared so formally, and we must purposefully seek out their views and opinions. As external stakeholders, their interests and scope are diverse. How some of these interests intersect or are aligned with others could be quite complex. Hence, we need to try and make sense of these interacting and interrelated web by mapping out these interests and concern and understanding their potential impact on school operations. That is what you call stakeholder analysis that would help guide future action. In getting our stakeholders involved, our goal is to avoid the potential adverse issues and make these stakeholders our allies in the change process. For the so-called stakeholder analysis, there are models and methods in doing it, but going through them, most of them would cover three basic steps. The first is identifying your stakeholders. And that is done through what we call a stakeholder map. In doing so, we must set and define our categories, of course, guided by our own mission and the school's mission and values. Consider their level of influence and interest, whether they would be internal or external stakeholders or key stakeholders. And we need to set a priority on the manner of engaging them. On the right side of the screen is a map, a variant of the stakeholder map that we presented earlier. And you could use this as a guide. Who are my stakeholders? And then draw lines to delineate the the web of relationships among the stakeholders. Understand your school's key stakeholders. Go deeper to determine their motivations. What they may be able to contribute is one aspect. Check the resources, mindful of the knowledge, expertise, networks, formal and informal. So, in other words, we do not only look at what they can donate or what they can give or what they can share, but that is by itself very important. Some of them, though, may not be in a position to give out materials, whatever, but they have the influence, they have the knowledge, and the networks. And these we would have to find out and effectively engage. As regards the stakeholders' interest, how much would they want to be involved? Or how deeply would they want to be involved? Better still, we might want to ask ourselves also, how much do we want to involve them? How critical is their involvement to success? And understanding them in these terms would guide our engagement process. In assessing the stakeholders, we should consider their potential to threaten implementation of our initiatives, as well as their potential for cooperation and support. Just like this crisis, there are positive and, of course, it's a pandemic considered in these terms. But then, like any crisis, there are opportunities that it offers. And many of our opportunities to engage partners is very useful in this process. This is an example of a stakeholder analysis worksheet. If you notice, there are the top three filled out to give an example of how we would distill the information and put it there, which later on could be looked at as a whole in order to guide our priority setting and the way we would engage which stakeholders with the different roles and categories. The parents I have dealt with in and the local government unit need no need to dwell on that. But I would like to emphasize, for instance, the local businesses like the computer shop. How important are they? They're not critically important in order for us to do to affect our reforms. The support, maybe it could be high, very high. What is our interest in them? Well, they can cooperate with us in the instruction. They could share learning space. What is in it for them? Our learners may be a new market for their service. How threatening are they? Perhaps a medium level. What strategy should we employ to in engaging them? That will be up to us. So for every major stakeholder group and rules that we envisage, you might want to fill it out and do a bit of analysis there. It is in a way self-determined, but then the data in doing so, but then the data that we obtain through our environmental scanning would also provide some objective guidance there. In the three basic steps for stakeholder analysis, we, having identified the appropriate level, having identified the a word on the previous table. Note that no two parties are exactly the same. If they form a significant group or hold great influence, we should take note of their needs and carefully plan our ways to contact. And doing the stakeholder analysis, we have to identify as well the appropriate level of stakeholder engagement. We draw from the initial analysis, check their potential as benefactors or threats, and develop an appropriate strategy. Some of these strategies, or perhaps we can limit them to the four mentioned in blue, shown in blue. Inform, we have to inform them, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. But just what exactly would these mean for our purposes? Informing. Essentially, that would be a one-way communication. We could do that through media announcements, press releases, making position statements, and prepared statements delivered through media and the social media, etc. Essentially, it is moving and sharing information without plans for a real two-way dialogue. In consulting, we have to present proposals and options and actively seek feedback as input in planning. The difference between just informing and consulting. So in other words, in informing, well, we tell them something, but in consulting, we must, there's a level of engagement there. We have to present our ideas, actively seek feedback, and if possible, incorporate those feedback into our planning process. With this consultation, we stand to benefit from this in the field. He or she knows the opinion leaders, who are the decision makers, and who have what are the power and control structures. So we benefit most from consultations because of the knowledge on the our stakeholders' knowledge on the ground. The next level of stakeholder engagement would be involving. And what does it mean? They have to be engaged in identifying options. We jointly implement actions from their inputs. And in doing so, we need to set well-defined roles and expectations, giving active and genuine. We need to define well-defined roles and expectations, giving active and then genuine feedback. If it is a deal breaker, we must be forthright and say it is so. At the other level would be collaborate and empower. That means doing shared decision making, doing action based on the shared goals. Arriving at this stage would involve process and on the part of the school managers, greater preparation. But The main advantage is it would form more lasting bonds and enduring work. Stakeholder touchpoints. The touchpoint is an influential action through communication, human contact, or whatever interaction. Each touchpoint is a message that touches a stakeholder or a customer in some way, altogether creating the client experience. Note how, by the way, that stakeholder touch point derives from marketing techniques and strategies. At each stage in the engagement cycle, or that reaches a stakeholder or a customer in some way, altogether creating the overall client experience. And at each stage of the engagement cycle, the key messages can be crafted as part of the strategy to produce the desired effect. What are these touch points? Again, they go by stages. At first, awareness. The relation with the first awareness of the service. As the song says, it starts with one hello. Those of you who are old enough might remember that song. The next stage in the process is discovery, where we progress to knowledge when the clients learn a little bit more of our services. Consideration, or the client has gained enough to consider or think through availing of our new products or service. And then selecting, which is representing the actual, what they call in marketing, the point of sale. And once engaged, client satisfaction. The school should be able to sustain that satisfaction by developing loyalty. And at the point, the satisfied client eventually becomes your advocate, informing others and encouraging them to follow suit. The next table shows an example of a touchpoint worksheet. On the left side, gives us some guide questions, and at each stage, communication channels that we can use, as well as potential messages that we can muster. These media and the messaging would have to be drawn from our perception or our sense of what are the client's wants, and what is a desired client experience at some point. For example, awareness, the desired client experience is that everything is there, ready for him or her to access and understandable. In discovery, all these materials are readily available when he or she wants them. The desired client experience is he or she should have a clear idea of what changes or what proposals are being made, so we can give them program prospectus, etc. The template shared by Dr. Ieban in the other day is an example of a good proposal, which would be a desirable client experience, and so forth. Finally, how do we improve and enhance the experience? Well, as they say, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. So even with a highly positive client experience, we can always improve it. And therefore, in engaging our stakeholders, we can be guided with these with this desiderata in a way. How to what do we tell them? we reach them to make them aware? What sort of support do we give them when they are already aware and when they're discovering the services on offer? What materials, messages we can provide to make the tipping point for them to become an active client. And when they make the decision, we have to be ready to keep them to move up to becoming a successful client, giving us positive feedback, ready to re-engage us, and actively participating in our activities. And finally, making referrals to others. So that, in essence, is a work. You could use this as a worksheet in planning for in planning for your engagements, and of course, this would also guide what sort of resources you will have to earmark and for what and define the purpose to what end will they be used. At each stage of the involvement, our goal is to create a consistently positive experience for the stakeholder. With carefully crafted messages using varied communication tools, we can make that stakeholder engagement even more effective and active as well as engaging. And then our takeaway here, maintaining a relationship with our stakeholders hinges on communication, moving our ideas to other persons. In this day and age, so many communication tools and platforms are available. Their effective use is limited only by your or our imagination. But one important point is to be able to package and present the message in the most effective and effective, even being forthright in presenting the information, no room for exaggeration or false claims. Our message can be presented in a way that is polite, palatable, and pleasant. The Filipinos are masters of that. Finally, let me share the phases in what we would describe as our journey with partners and stakeholders. This is the journey that we have documented at Inotech. And at the bottom of that, at the beginning of that journey is what we would call a transactional phase. Based on a contract of engagement, we define each roles, and the expectations are clearly imparted. Quantity, quality, and time, and what would be expected of us, what would be expected of the partners. And that's where we have memoranda of understanding, and if it involves, commitment of tangible resources, that means a memorandum of agreement. At the next phase is being developmental and consultative. Our activities are planned in coordination with close consultations. Inputs of partners or stakeholders are actively sought, and they really form the basis for action. You don't just consult and then go on your merry way. There must be genuine respect for the inputs of others. And we will see, as I have seen, the results of engaging our partners in this. As a strategy for peculiar to Inotech, some of our partners become an extension of our presence. Note that Inotech or Simio Inotech covers Southeast Asia, the 11 countries in Southeast Asia. We are a relatively small organization. And so to maintain relevance and presence in various countries, we need to have partners and, well, reach out to stakeholders in the various professional communities, institutions, and organizations within the country and across the region. It's a strategy that we have adopted to be able to reach out to more stakeholders and parts, and thus maintain relevance of our programs. At the level of the school, being an extension of the presence, meaning having your advocates in some areas. And finally, going on to the highest level of engagement and maintaining that culture of engagement is having our partners co-create our programs, our activities, and our interventions. The joint design and planning of programs and learning events. Thus, engaging stakeholders is an essential element in planning and implementing reforms in our schools in order to better serve our constituencies. The current emergency, serves to remind us that we are more linked together than we thought, and the problem in some sectors would impact on the others. Solutions are best developed together in concert rather than as one group or one sector trying to do everything or addressing everything by itself. At the end of the day, you will be in the best position to gauge and plan your engagement with your stakeholders. What we have tried to do here is basically to put together and distill the essential elements and share with you some of the practices which we have found effective over the years. As a final word, I was only able to touch briefly on the various programs and that's on offer. There are several other toolkits and learning events that are taking place. Let me share our touch points, so to speak, along with my contact details. I would personally welcome any message from you. And on the right upper left-hand side are the touch points. You can reach us through the web, our website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and a generic email address info@simyoinotech.org. At the bottom at the left is my personal or my email address. I would welcome your feedback and your suggestions, as well as ways to engage you actively. So with that, let me once again thank the project team led by Dr. Esther Ojena. They have been a pleasure to work with, and it was truly a learning experience for me. Let me express once again my appreciation for PAPSCO and PEAC for this opportunity to reach out and the project we were fortunate to play a part in. Thank you very much, and hope to see you very soon.
Thank you, Sir Bennett, for making us aware of the possibilities, opportunities, and benefits of stakeholder engagement in education, and for walking us through the process of how to engage and build touch points with the school stakeholders. Definitely, it's a big help for our viewers today. And actually, we have one good comment from the participants, from Ma'am Hermina Villarino Fat. Okay, she said, very interesting topic about engaging stakeholders, which is very helpful in school operation. Okay, and all the rest, they're saying their thanks to Papsku and Peya. So again, thank you so much. Do you have any response to that, Sir Bennett?
Well, by way of a added word, I very much appreciate that positive feedback, but it would be even more positive having shared my email address and my contact points. Please talk to us, engage us, and I'm sure we would be able to do something together as partners. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sir Bennett. And there are no more questions in our live stream. So at this point, uh, let me now call on. By the way, if you have questions, you can still raise it through our live stream and all the contact information that we have for you. So don't be. You can share it anytime with us, and we will answer that. And are we still having the question and answer? I I think we can now proceed to the summation, right? Okay. So at this point, we now proceed to the summation and closing statement. I would like to call our project leader, the project team leader, Dr. Esther Biohana, for the summation and closing statement.
Let me say good morning once more, and I'm happy to present the summary of what we have learned for today and the past few days. The private schools have been given an opportunity to understand the scanning system. We have provided the toolkit, and on day 2, which was yesterday, we looked into flexible learning options, education technology affordances, which have implications to curriculum and technology requirements, the technology, uh, pedagogical content knowledge, and appropriate technologies for teaching and learning. And we have been pushed to really take responsibility for learning as teachers and as administrators. As we discussed today, the evaluation for flexible learning and stakeholder engagements, we uh, take note that we are concerned about measures and evidences for learnings and tools for assessment, and tapping people, institutions to support the learners, the teachers, and the schools. And as we move uh, let me, and as we move forward, we've taken note that before the COVID, before we have placed these activities to you, maybe a lot of you have been thinking this way, as you can see on screen. These are big words, especially for people who manage institutions. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. Taken together, these words stand for difficult conditions and situations. As COVID-19 pandemic blurred our vision, maybe for most of us, for a lot of school leaders, we thought it was difficult to navigate our way in education. But things, I hope, have been made clearer from day 1 to day 2 to day 3 so that in a sense we're guided with the actions that we have to take. So that volatility can mean vision, uncertainty can mean understanding, complexity can mean clarity, ambiguity can mean agility. The toolkit is made available to you. We will update it prior to the June 25 webinar so that we're able to incorporate important concerns and issues that you had raised to the speakers and generally to us. For June 25, we will have a panel discussion and discuss the way forward. We shall try to explore out-of-the-box actions, innovative and creative ways for collaboration in different areas that have been tackled from day 1 to day 3. And they will consist of the speakers that we have had from day 1 to day 3 as panel members for the discussion. At this point, let me thank PAPSCO and PEA for the opportunity given to us. Let me thank as well the participants for listening to us, and we encourage you to give your questions so that in the final webinar on June 25, we shall be able to consolidate all of them and give you a better perspective on how we transition from our traditional mode of delivering education to flexible learning. To all of you, magandang umaga, magandang umagang muli sa inyong lahat. Thank you so much.